Last night, I discussed here with Peter this legislation before the federal parliament, the Currency Restrictions on the Use of Cash Bill 2019. Now, I have to confess I knew nothing about this legislation until a bloke lined me up in Melbourne airport. And I thought he was talking double Dutch. I came home and did some homework. And basically and unbelievably, the legislation, not yet through the parliament and hopefully won't make it, will ban the use of cash transactions over $10,000. Break the rules, 2 years in jail. It has amazingly passed the House of Representatives, where Labor voted to support it. God only knows what the coalition were up to. But many members of Parliament have woken up and are now writing to me. The Senate referred the bill to their References Committee. It handed down its findings last Friday. The Senate inquiry received 2,649 submissions by early December, the majority opposing the bill. Basically, the majority arguing that the government should not be interfering with an individual's legal right to spend cash how they wish. Or put another way, we should not be making the use of cash a criminal offence. However, the federal government says this is intended to fight the black economy by stamping out tax evasion. That is rubbish. Of course, if the tax system wasn't so ridiculously punitive, you wouldn't have to worry about tax evasion. But I made the point last night, forget the low-hanging fruit. Go after the big multinationals who do secret deals with the tax office in order to minimise the tax they pay, behind closed doors, I might add. Or have a look at outfits like this company Atlassian and this bloke Cannon Brooks, who seems to have an opinion on everything. That company reportedly earns $1 billion in revenue, but is reportedly structured to pay no corporate tax in Australia.
If that's true, that is a disgrace.
Yeah, well, however, listen to this. Since last night's discussion, one issue we touched lightly on has emerged of real concern, and this is the question of negative interest rates. Negative interest rates. That is, you put your money with the bank and they pay you interest, as we sit now. But interest rates are almost zero. If they were below zero, you would pay the bank for handling your money. But punishing people who pay in cash by threatening them with jail terms forces them into the clutches of the banks. Do you get the drift? The banks have just been hammered at a royal commission. Is this government now giving back a few trillion? Yes, trillion to the banks. Now, there are 5 central banks already with interest rates below zero. Japan minus 0.10%, Sweden minus 0.330%, the European Central Bank minus 0.40%, Denmark minus 0.70%, Switzerland minus 0.80%. Now, the way we're going, the Reserve Bank might end up having interest rates below zero. So where does the 10 grand cash limit fit into this? Because of dreadful returns, bank deposits have been falling. Customers would rather hoard their money than stick it in the bank. But according to the most current data available, this is terrifying, as at the 28th of February, total bank deposits were $2.12 trillion. Stay with me for the math, as the Americans would say. When an economy has interest rates below zero, the banks are offering their deposit customers interest rates below zero. So a negative interest rate of, say, minus 0.25% means you would be paying the banks. And at minus 25% on $2.1 trillion, we would be paying the banks $5.304 billion just to hold our money in a bank account. So if you restrict the amount of cash that can be spent to 10,000, fearing jail, customers would be less likely to hoard cash. Because if the bank were to tell you it'd cost you a couple of $1,000s a year to maintain your bank account, you'd go and tell the bank to shove it. As Malcolm Fraser said, you'd put your money under the bed. But this legislation is designed to drive people to the banks. Welcome, as one of my listeners said, to the Orwellian state of Australia. As another of my listeners said, my spending discretion as a large tax-paying Australian should be my personal freedom. Stop eroding the freedom of quiet, hard-working Australians. No one politician, said this listener I know, could run my business, but here they are running the country with further intrusion into our freedom and privacy. Well, Matt Barry wrote to me today. He's the chief executive of freelancer.com, and he has alerted me to the International Monetary Fund and a recent report called Cashing In, How to Make Negative interest rates work? I asked him to join us tonight. He's right here beside us. Matt, good evening. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Is this the Reserve Bank in step with everybody else trying to get the interest rates below zero and the banks then make a pretty penny?
Well, it's more than that. This has nothing to do with the black economy and everything to do with the Reserve Bank of Australia running out of bullets to fight a recession and to stimulate the economy. Typically, when an economy goes into recession, central banks have to cut interest rates, policy rates, by between 300 basis points and 600 basis points. That's 3% to 6%. Now, with the Reserve Bank currently at 0.5%, that would mean that there's not much room to move before you get to zero, and the banks wouldn't be able to pay you any interest. The IMF came out in February of last year and published a detailed report, and anyone can go to the IMF's website and look this up. It's called Cashing In on Negative Interest Rates, where they're saying, actually, we think that banks can go to negative interest rates. In fact, they talked about a scenario where a bank might go from 2% interest rate, central bank, to -4%. But they said this won't work if you continue to have cash. So they contemplate a range of things that you can do as a central bank to stop people simply taking the money out of the bank and hoarding it under their bed. Or, so by doing that, they've talked about banning cash altogether. They've talked about, in this particular report, putting an expiry date on notes that you withdraw them from the ATM.
Just hang on, you're going too quickly here.
Yep.
Just to start slowly. So, do you think that people in Canberra who are proffering this legislation understand what the agenda could well be? That basically, to keep it simple, people watching you, if the interest rates go below zero and go into negative territory, and you're saying 0.4% or 4%,
no, -4%.
-4%,
yeah.
then basically we are going to be pouring a stack of money into the banks, and this would be one instrument whereby they could, quote unquote, regenerate the economy.
It's more than keeping money in the bank account. It's about stimulating purchases. So they want you to either take your money out of the bank and purchase products and services with it,
Right. Yep.
or buy housing,
Yes.
or a range of other ways to kind of grow the economy by spending. Right. So that's why.
Is there an international agenda, therefore, with the IMF and everybody else, to eliminate cash altogether?
Ultimately, yes. And there's other benefits there because you can raise taxation more easily, and you can track the spending of money, anti-money laundering efforts and so forth.
So you said...
Don't I have a right to spend my money without the government tracking how I spend it? I mean, I resent the government tracking the way I might spend my money. I deeply resent that.
Absolutely.
And that means that
I don't think the Labor Party and the Liberals, those sheep that just put their hand up and follow and say, here, 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 understand any of this, do you?
Not at all.
No.
I mean, they've been sold that this is all about the black economy.
Yeah,
I mean, cash in the Australian economy, the use of cash has been dropping anyway. It's about 4% of GDP. There's been increasing use of things like Tap and Go and FPOS and the Next Generation Payments Platform and so forth. So cash is naturally dropping anyway. But this is purely about monetary policy, and it's purely about the RBA running out of bullets in an economy that was about to go into recession before the coronavirus came along. With blowing a housing bubble beyond all proportions to try and stimulate growth, and really running out of ideas and not tackling the hard things that need to be done.
Right. Now I've read that paper, this is Matt Barry, a written paper, a stack of detail and whatever, to this Senate inquiry. Do you reckon anyone read that?
I would hope that someone on the Senate inquiry...
OK, well, what you've said in this paper that you wrote is this. Looking down the track, you said, quote, we may have, quote, a serial number lottery plan in which each year the central bank would pick a number between 0 and 9 out of a hat, and all bills with a serial number ending in that number would no longer be legal tender. That's what you've written.
That's one of many of the things that were contemplated in the IMF paper that was published.
So basically...
This is great.
Yeah, that's right. So what's happening... The reason I wanted to talk to this man tonight is, Graham, is what is happening is there are people down there in Canberra who don't understand what the real agenda is behind this lump of legislation.
Correct. Absolutely.
And did anyone... Has the Treasurer spoken to you? Has any of those people, the Finance Minister? Matt Cormann, do you understand this? Does Josh Frydenberg understand it?
I don't think they've read the paper from the IMF, and I don't think they've read the blog post that they've published about it. It's quite a detailed paper that the IMF has published, and I think that every politician that's voting on this should read this before they actually vote on it.
You have said that the IMF, in your words, is openly talking about central banks needing to go to -4% in a recession.
Correct.
So, because people at home think, my God, why would they drop interest rates again? Because if you couldn't make the economy move at 1.5% cash rate, why would it change at 0.5 cash rate?
Right.
And up at home they're saying, well, why would you do this? So you're saying, wait on, we've moved now from 7%, which was what, the interest rate some years ago, down to, 0.5? Then we go to negative territory, and suddenly people listening to you at home are going to be paying the bank a lot of money.
Correct.
Billions.
Correct. So it's trying to cause behaviour that causes you to spend that money to stimulate the economy. That's what it's trying to do. It's trying to get you to buy a house, for example, because people perceive it's a better place than keeping it in the bank. It's trying to get you to buy products and services. It's trying to get the money out of the bank in many ways because you're penalised for keeping it there, and spend it. But what they don't want you to do is take the money out of the bank and put it under your mattress.
But haven't I been told for years that we've got too much in housing?
Of course.
I've been reading that for 20 years.
We have the second most overpriced housing market in the world, and the second most indebted nation in the world because of housing.
Well, that's the big worry, isn't it? The big issue, of course, is the indebtedness of banks on the mortgage front.
Correct.
And you've written about that in your paper. Just before you go, simple question. Are you saying that the Reserve Bank is on, because all this mob hook up with one another, central banks all around the world, is this Reserve Bank on a mission to allow interest rates to go below zero?
I believe it will. It's currently at 50 basis points, which is 0.5%. The way the system works in Australia, there's a corridor system, so effectively it's actually at 0.25% already. So one more cut, and we are effectively in Australia at zero, and then there are no other options other than policy around fiscal policy, or going negative, or doing other hard work, such as taxation reform, to try and stimulate the economy.
Well, there you are. There's something. No wonder none of us heard anything about it. No wonder the bloke hauled me up at the Melbourne airport, and this has never been discussed with anybody. It hasn't gone into the public place at all. Matt Barry, we'll come back to you. It's a big issue, Graham.
It's huge.
Big issue.
Because I didn't know any of that.
No, well, as a result of the interview I did with Peter last night, then Matt has rung me and other people are going, hello, what the hell is going on? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
But if someone like me doesn't get it, and I read everything, what has the average punter got? They've got no idea of this.
Absolutely.